Hey guys, how's it going? Avishai here with another episode of What Israel Is. And I feel somewhat blessed in that just a couple of days after I discussed the UN here, I am now given another reason to further elaborate on the topic. I want to begin first by reading a now month-old article from the Wall Street Journal titled, "At the UN, Only Israel is an Occupying Power." It is by one Eugene Kantorovich and Penny Grunside. So I'll skip a few paragraphs, but essentially the whole premise is that they wrote a research about the UN's treatment of Israel with regards to the whole situation in the territories and how the UN treats other similar or worse instances. So it goes like this. Our research shows that the UN uses an entirely different rhetoric and set of legal concepts when dealing with Israel compared with situations of occupation or settlements worldwide. For example, Israel is referred to as the occupying power 530 times in General Assembly resolutions. Yet in 7 major instances of past or present prolonged military occupations, Indonesia in East Timor, Turkey in northern Cyprus, Russia in areas of Georgia, Morocco in western Sahara, Vietnam in Cambodia, Armenia in areas of Azerbaijan, and Russia in Ukraine's Crimea, the number is 0. The UN has not called any of these countries an occupying power, not even once. It gets worse. Since 1967, General Assembly resolutions have referred to Israeli-held territories as occupied 2,342 times, while the territories mentioned above are referred to as occupied a mere 16 times combined. The term appears in 90% of resolutions dealing with Israel, and only in 14% of the much smaller number of resolutions dealing with all other situations, a difference that vastly surpasses the threshold of statistical significance. Similarly, Security Council resolutions refer to the disputed territories in the Israeli-Arab conflict as occupied 31 times, but only a total 5 times in reference to all 7 other conflicts combined. General Assembly resolutions employ the term grave to describe Israel's actions 513 times, as opposed to 14 total for all other conflicts, which involve the full gamut of human rights abuses, including allegations of ethnic cleansing and torture. Verbs such as condemn and deplore are sprinkled into Israel-related resolutions 10 more times than they are in resolutions about the other conflicts, setting a unique tone of disdain. Israel has been reminded by resolutions against it of the country's obligations under the Geneva Conventions about 500 times since 1967, as opposed to 2 times for the other situations. In particular, the resolutions refer to Article 49.6, which states that the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. This is the provision that the entire legal case against Israel's settlements is based upon. Yet no UN body has ever invoked Article 49.6 in relation to any of the other occupations mentioned above. This even though, as Mr. Kantarovich shows in a new research article, Unsettled, a global study of settlements in occupied territories, all these situations have seen settlement activity, typically on a scale that eclipses Israel's. However, the UN has only used the legally loaded word settlements to describe Israeli civilian communities, 256 times by the General Assembly and 17 by the Security Council. Neither body has ever used that word in relation to any other country with settlers in occupied territory. Our findings don't merely quantify the UN's double standard. The evidence shows that the organization's claim to represent the interest of international justice is hollow, because the UN has no interest in battling injustice unless Israel is the country accused. At a time of serious global crises, from the disintegrating Middle East to a land war and belligerent occupation in Europe, the leaders of the free world cannot afford to tempt the UN into indulging its obsessions, especially when the apparent consequences of such scapegoating is that the organization ignores other situations and people in desperate need of attention. So that was Mr. Eugene Kantarovich and Penny Gruenside. And the reason why I'm continuing to discuss the UN today has to do with a year-long process that came to its culmination yesterday at another branch of the UN, being UNESCO. UNESCO being the branch of the UN in charge of education and history and culture. Among other things, they are in charge of determining which sites in the world are worth preserving and stuff like that. So UNESCO came to a unique resolution yesterday, and the resolution was, as I said, the culmination of a process that took about a year when the Palestinian Authority came up with it to begin with. And I've read the resolution, and it caused quite a bit of noise here, and not much of it has carried over to international media, at least not now. I've read several articles from back in October when the resolution was raised, and several others other articles at some points. But right now, I haven't seen a lot of stuff in the international press. So I want to begin discussing this resolution by first going through a bit of history and a bit of myth and fiction. We'll begin with the myth and fiction part. Sadly, when discussing these issues, we drift into these territories where history is a bit tricky to separate from the myth and the fiction. So we begin with the Hebrew patriarch Abraham, being elderly and childless except for his concubine's Runt. He is visited by angels who tell him that he will receive a true-born heir from his wife, Sarah. And this indeed comes true, and he has now a second true-born son from his wife, the name of Isaac, and a few years later, God goes like, well, there's been a recall at the factory, and we need that kid back. And Abraham shrugs and says, okay, and he takes the kid and has the kid build his own pyre where his corpse shall be put to blaze after his father slits his throat. And just as Abraham is about to take the knife to his own kid, an angel intervenes and tells him that don't, and kind of shines a light at a deer that has been caught by the horns in a thistle bush, and he replaces his son with the more appropriate sacrifice. And this is the story of how Abraham's faith was tested or something. This story is relevant because the place where the sacrifice took place is named, or at least in the Midrash, which is the theological Jewish interpretation, rather extrapolation. That mountain where the sacrifice took place is Mount Moriah, and Mount Moriah is also the site of the Hebrew temple. Now, what is the temple? So after the receiving of the Torah by Moses at Mount Sinai, he commands the people of Israel to build a portable place of worship, and this is called the tabernacle, or Hamishkan in Hebrew, or Ohel Moed rather. And this is a place that the people of Israel carry with them. They fold and carry it with them, with several items of note, such as the ark and other items of worship. And this tabernacle is referred to throughout the Bible many times. Whether or not it was actually a thing is, well, I'm not the person, I'm not the expert that knows about it, but I have some doubt about it, because it seems like it was maybe a late insert that kind of was placed there as a prefiguration of the temple, so as to show that centralized worship was always part of the Israelites' way of life. Now, afterwards we have the tabernacle ceases to exist, essentially, when King Solomon constructs the temple at that same Mount Moriah. And what we get from there on out is the establishment of Temple Judaism. Whereas beforehand we had many altars and places of worship. From that point onwards, we have a centralized type of Judaism, with Jews required to make pilgrimage to one spot, and where they're required to worship at one spot, and the entire priestly caste is essentially placed at that one spot. So that's the temple. It was supposed to be a marvel of architecture, and there's quite a long and tedious elaboration of what it looks like and its dimensions in the Bible. And this temple persisted for several hundred years until the conquest of Judea at the hands of the Babylonians, headed by King Nebuchadnezzar, who has the temple destroyed and the many sacred objects taken as loot. At that point, several hundreds and thousands of Jews are expelled to Babylon, while others remain. And some say that the elite are those that were expelled to Babylon. But later on, as Babylon is itself conquered by Persians, and under King Cyrus or Koresh, the Jews are allowed return and allowed the reconstruction of their temple. We have those who led the return from Babylon had the reconstruction of the temple, or rather the construction of a second temple at that same spot. Later on, as again the land shifts hands, under the hands of Tetrarch Herod the Great, the temple is renovated, and this was supposed to have been a major renovation, where the temple has been made far more impressive than it originally was, constructed by those returning from exile. Sadly, this renovation was short-lived, and in 70 AD, following major revolts by the Jews in the province of Judea, the future Emperor Titus manages to breach the walls of Jerusalem and destroy the temple. This following earlier on that the temple was actually sacked at the beginning of this particular war. And following this war, we essentially don't have a temple anymore. About 60 years forward into the future, Emperor Hadrian, following another uprising by the Jews that took place about 20 years beforehand, feels that he needs to pacify the Jews, and thus he gives them a dubious gift. He reconstructs the ruined Jerusalem and expands it. He also renames it. He calls it Alia Capitolina, and he builds a new temple on the mount, but it's a temple to Jupiter, and in front of it he places the graven images of Jupiter and of himself. Those not in the know, this is, well, graven images are a big deal in Judaism. Yeah, it's a big no-no. And not only that, but he also forbids circumcision. All of these measures meant to supposedly appease the Jews because of his cultural misunderstanding of the Jews' nature, cause a third revolt. And this one is disastrous. All of those 3 revolts were disastrous and took a very heavy toll on the empire, but quite probably a heavier toll still on the Jews. Following the war, this third revolt, Jews were banned completely from Alia Capitolina, and the province of Judea was renamed Syria Palestina, so as to disassociate the province from the Jews. During Constantine the Great's time, the temple that Hadrian built was destroyed, and a church was built in that place, which served the Byzantines who lived there. And then, when the Arabs conquered the city, a mosque was built there instead, with another building called the Dome of Rock. And the Dome of Rock houses a stone that is, according to Judaism, the stone of foundation or something of the sort, where the whole world was created from that rock, or something of the sort. The mosque, Al-Aqsa, was built on the spot where Muhammad flew to the heaven on the back of his weird Mount Al-Burak, which was a ass with a woman's head. So this is a quick redacted history of the Temple Mount. Now, this is all relevant because the temple figures in very heavily into Jewish theology and also Christian theology. It is the center of a lot of Jewish and Christian eschatology, that is, end times theology. According to Ezekiel, it is the center of the new utopia to come, and according to Christian eschatology, which is extrapolated from Ezekiel's prophecy, it is the center of New Jerusalem, the heavenly Jerusalem that will descend from the sky and again be the center of the post-apocalypse utopia. And all references to this, to the Temple Mount's religious significance to Jews and Christians, and to the temples of Solomon, or to the temples of the returning Jews from Babylon, or the renovated temple of Herod, all references to those things are completely absent from a new UNESCO resolution regarding Jerusalem. And this resolution is essentially a condemnation of Israel's handling of holy sites in Jerusalem, but it focuses on the site of the Temple Mount, which is only referred to within the document as A-Haram ash-Sharif or Al-Aqsa Mosque. A-Haram ash-Sharif, if I understand correctly, means the sacred compound. So that is one part, but even worse is that there is references there to Al-Burak Plaza, followed by the Western Wall's compound placed in quotes. References to A-Haram ash-Sharif, Al-Aqsa, or Al-Burak Plaza are not accompanied by such quotes, and yet the Western Wall compound is placed under quotes. This befuddles the mind. I simply don't understand it. But to those who don't know what the Western Wall compound is, it is a segment of an ancient wall that was essentially the protective wall, or the wall that encircled the Temple Mount, and it is essentially the last piece of the temple that we still have. It's not a piece of the temple itself, but it is a part of the temple large, and it is as such a place that is heavily revered by Jews. If it is only second to the Temple Mount itself as in its religious significance. Now, I'm not religious, and I don't have any strong sentiments to the temple or to the Western Wall or anything as such, but I recognize that it has significance for religious Jews. There's a lot to be said about the way Israel is handling the Western Wall compound, especially with regards to non-Orthodox Jews, which are marginalized there. But again, the disdain in putting the name in quotations, this kills me. I should probably also say some words about the Temple Mount today. Essentially, under provisions meant to keep the peace, when Eastern Jerusalem was taken from Jordan during the Six-Day War, the Jordanian authority over the Temple Mount was preserved, and under the Jordanian management of the area by a religious authority named as the Waqf, Jews are not allowed to scale the Temple Mount. Again, it's a very sticky issue, and essentially there are a lot of hardcore Orthodox Jews who say Jews are not allowed to scale the temple for religious reasons of them being impure. But there's a discussion going on within Orthodox circles about this, and many Jews wish to scale the mount and worship there because the mount is the single holiest spot in the world for Jews. I guess I just wanted to discuss those things to kind of shed some light on and maybe make palpable the kind of bias going on within the UN with regards to Israel, and maybe start a discussion regarding this double standard. Well, this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you have any comments or anything, I just wanted to say that the podcast is primarily for people outside of Israel, but sadly most of the people who listen to it are people I'm familiar with and Israelis, and this is a good point to maybe ask you guys to help me pass it along and reach the targeted audience. So this is it, and until next week, have an awesome weekend, guys.